alaikum and welcome back to News and Views on Salam Media. My name is Shabnam Palesa Mohammed, standing in for Jeff Halper. And as promised, in our next segment, we're talking to Professor Jeff Halper, Director of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. Professor Halper, thank you very much for joining us today on News and Views.
Thanks for having me. Good to be on.
Absolutely. So we have a very important topic to discuss today, and a very specific one, as reported by Doctors Without Borders in a press release dated the 22nd of December 2025. New rules threaten to withdraw registration from international NGOs. So Israel's new registration rules for international NGOs or INGOs risk leaving hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza without life-saving healthcare in 2026. And that's the warning from Doctors Without Borders, which is one of the largest medical organizations operating in Gaza today. The new requirements threaten to withdraw registration from INGOs beginning on the 1st of January. So in a couple of days' time, the non-registration would prevent organizations, including MSF or Doctors Without Borders, from providing essential services to people in Gaza and the West Bank. Prof, what is your initial reaction to this warning, this alarm bell, essentially, that's being shared by Doctors Without Borders?
Well, this has to do not only with Gaza, of course, but with the West Bank as well. It's a closing down of the entire Palestinian territory to, to the work of NGOs. In other words, to not only dealing with Palestinian needs for food and housing and health and so on, but in general to try to minimize the exposure of what Israel is doing to the world that has to come through these NGOs. And to be specific, but it most urgently affects Gaza, of course, because Gaza is in the middle of a starvation. It's in the middle of the destruction of winter, of flooding, of tremendous medical and health needs and so on. So it's especially important for there. And basically, what Israel has decided to do, and its political agenda is very clear, is on January 1st, it's going to deregister any humanitarian organization working in Gaza or the West Bank that doesn't comply to some very vague requirements that are very political. And those requirements are, organizations will be rejected from working in Gaza if they're involved in terrorism, anti-Semitism, delegitimization of Israel. Now, what the delegitimization of Israel is, it's so vague, it's so broad, it can be anything, including criticism, of course, Holocaust denial, or the denial of the crimes of October 7th. Those are the requirements that NGOs, international NGOs, have to meet in order to be registered to work in Gaza. So there's just two things I want to say at this point. One is that these are obviously vague and political conditions that allow Israel to reject any organization. For example, delegitimization of Israel, which is the main problem that the NGOs are facing, because if you're in Gaza, let's say you're working on medical issues, and you have a lack of infrastructure, destruction of hospitals, everything else, your very reporting on this medical situation in Gaza is seen by Israel as delegitimization of Israel, or criticism of what it's doing, or working with or cooperating with terrorism, because you're undermining, the Israeli efforts, military efforts in Gaza. So, I mean, these are requirements that are easily used to block the registration of groups. And the second point I want to make is that Israel has no right to do this. This is not up to Israel. This isn't conditional. Israel doesn't have to agree that these INGOs come to work in Gaza. It's a legal requirement on Israel by international law, and also through UN resolutions and UN, and its very membership in the UN, that it is obliged to accept these organizations working. These have nothing to do with Israel. These are organizations whose purposes are to deal with the humanitarian crises and needs that arise. This is the decision of the UN. The Palestinians are protected in international law, in terms of their health and well-being, and Israel has no legal right to do this. So one of the questions also is, where would the pushback come in the international community to say to Israel, no, you cannot do this? And unfortunately, there is no pushback.
Absolutely. And I think that was such a fascinating unpacking of what we're looking at here in terms of the criteria and of course, the impact on the Palestinian people who are experiencing trauma in every possible way, both physical and mental. Prof, it appears as if the strategy is so diabolical to the extent where NGOs inside are being prevented from doing their work, and NGOs outside are being banned and having sanctions placed on them, and their right to speak being censored and violated through the control of various media platforms. So it is a 360 strategy, a diabolical one, that for me speaks to the definition of genocide, which includes deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. For example, siege, starvation, expulsion, etc. Your comment on this move in terms of INGOs being included in the legal definition of genocide.
No, that's right. It's a continuation of the process of genocide. That's been well documented, and even well documented. 2 years ago, when the ICJ ruled that Israel's engaged in plausible genocide and imposed on Israel preventive measures to prevent the continuation of the genocide that Israel never followed, never acknowledged. You use the term diabolical. I don't like those kinds of terms, evil, diabolical, because, again, they're kind of vague. But I have to agree with you at this stage that they're accurate. This is absolutely diabolical. It's evil. There is no justification. There's no military justification for it. And even Israeli military people say that. There's no legal justification. This is all in violation of international law, and especially the Genocide Convention. Certainly in terms of the human cost, the people that are being affected are not the combatants at all. This is a genocide that's focused on civilians. The military part ended long ago. So what really is diabolical to me, but it's not only diabolical in terms of Israel, in terms of the international community that's sitting by and watching this happen, is that almost 2 years after the International Court of Justice ruled that this is a plausible genocide, Israel continues with impunity. There are no sanctions on Israel, and that's the problem. Because Israel doesn't care if you criticize it. Israel doesn't care about international law, certainly about the lives of Palestinians. None of that. That's where the diabolical comes in. There is no human value to life in any of Israel's policies towards Palestinians. But more than that, it's continuing with impunity. It's simply continuing, knowing so, and it's not even hiding it. In the light of day, continuing this genocide because it knows that there will be no sanctions. And that's where the diabolical begins to move from Israel. It stays on Israel, but it begins to move to the wider international community. And especially, I would say, Europe, and especially the United States, that is blocking the UN from taking any measures in the Security Council, because this all has to go to the Security Council of sanctioning Israel. And that's really, so this isn't only an Israel issue, it's an issue that there is no country in the world or institution in the world, including the ICJ, the ICC, the UN, that is able to stop Israel in this genocide that's going on in front of our eyes.
Absolutely. And certainly, Prof, we're looking at collective punishment, which we know in itself has a particular status in law, in international law. But also in terms of the criteria in the Genocide Convention, Prof, the acts that are included in the legal definition are killing members of the group and causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. And we're going to see that with international NGOs being blocked from participating. It appears as if there is nothing that these international NGOs can actually do. Because as you said, enforceability is an issue, and many of these organizations lack the capacity to themselves approach either national or international forums to be able to take a stand for the people. So they're helpless, they're on their own. But the impunity that you speak of is also being perpetrated by the US government in its treatment of NGOs that are speaking out for the Palestinian people, or, you know, the oppressed in general. They're being shut down, they're being put on various category lists, which makes it difficult for them to obtain donations. So it's certainly part of this blueprint in order to suppress dissent, to ensure that there's no aid going to people who are oppressed, and to further entrench this intention of a monopoly over Gaza and Palestine for the purposes of corporate profiteering. So this is what I call the acts of Zio-imperialism. I see it acting together against us trying to create a better world by being compassionate, by supporting each other. Your comments?
Yeah, one of the organizations, for example, that's been banned, and on January 1st, when this goes in, a deregistered organization whose registration is not accepted, has 60 days to remove its personnel from Gaza. One of the groups is Save the Children. Save the Children served about 120,000 Palestinian children in Gaza last year. They're being required now to leave Gaza. Of course, UNRWA, that was feeding the Gazans, that had 400 sites where people could get food, was banned by Israel, and the United States and Europe supported that. And then they put in this vicious Gaza humanitarian group sponsored by Israel that killed more than 1,000 Palestinians trying to get food, and had only 4 food distribution centers. So this is a conscious, this is a conscious, deliberate policy of genocide. And the political reasoning behind it, I think, is clear, at least in my thinking, in my writing. And that is, this is pacification. Zionism is a form of settler colonialism, as we all know. And its purpose is to Judaize Palestine, is to take over Palestine, to transform an Arab country into a Jewish country. And that means taking the land, displacing the population. And finally, the way it wins is through normalization. And normalization is the Abraham Accords that the Arab governments are party to. In other words, legitimizing, recognizing Israel, not only Israel, but all its settlements in the West Bank, basically Israel and its occupation, as legitimate, as normalized, as accepted. And that means then setting up, which has to happen in settler colonialism, as you all well know, setting up an apartheid regime where the Palestinians are stuck into 15% of historic Palestine. And hopefully, from Israel's point of view, they can displace, like they displaced half the Palestinians in 1948 in the Nakba, they can displace another 2 million from Gaza to places like South Sudan or who knows where. That's the idea. But the pacification is also, it's against the people, because there can be, it means breaking the resistance. And the goal of what's happening in Gaza is absolute quiet. No resistance, no reporting from NGOs on what's going on, a kind of a blackout on what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, to create a period of industrial quiet in which the Arab governments can then come into the Abraham Accords, and that ends everything. So there is a political context to the genocide, but of course a genocide stands by itself. There is no political or legal or human justification for genocide, and I think that has to be opposed, but that has to be opposed within the wider framework of fighting Israel's illegal settler colonial project. And in the end, it's true. Defeating Zionism, defeating the Zionist colonial project, and then moving on, in my opinion, to one democratic state, which is a whole other discussion, but at least moving on to something that's more just. But the genocide has its political reasons from Israel's point of view.
Incisive response there from Professor Jeff Halper, reporting from Al-Quds. Prof, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
There are over 200 million orphans globally. We can't help all of them, but what if we each helped just one? The Al Imdad Foundation now gives you an opportunity to help just one orphan from Syria or Palestine. For just 500 Rand per month, you can help safeguard the dignity of an orphan by assisting them with basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, medical care, and attention. Our orphan sponsorship program allows you to track the progress of your orphan through regular feedback. Make a difference in the life of an orphan today. Visit alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayer, where every detail matters.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Welcome back to Salam Media's News and Views with Shabnam Palesa Mohammed, standing in for Salaila. We're very happy to have Professor Jeff Halper with us this morning. And we have time for one last question, Prof. Although I could speak to you for many, many hours, I want to talk about the precedent that is being set, Prof, where a dictator country can say, well, we're not allowing this NGO to do any work in humanitarian crisis, whether that's Palestine or Sudan or it's Congo. We're just not going to allow it to happen. And that could extend beyond Palestine into what Israel describes as Greater Israel. So currently, Lebanon is being bombed. And it's not implausible that the same or similar kind of restrictions can be applied to Lebanon or Syria or Iraq and so on and so forth. And certainly many of us agree that the blueprint that's being set in Gaza is ultimately going to affect all of us, in particular in countries like Sudan and Congo, where Israel and Zionist imperialism is heavily involved. So, Prof, talk to us about this precedent setting and what is to be done. What can we do?
Well, it's true that I think what Israel's been doing in Gaza is testing how far it can go. And it's found it can go as far as it wants to go. It can go to genocide, which is the ultimate crime. And it can do so because, again, it doesn't have to fear international sanctions, because the way the international system is constructed, everything goes through the Security Council. Enforcement of international law, enforcement of UN resolutions, any actual action that you can take has to go through the UN internationally. Now, countries can take initiatives, of course. I mean, the United States could sanction Israel by itself, but that's not going to happen. And if you make the fate of the Palestinians or the people of Lebanon or the region or Sudan dependent upon each of 194 countries in the world taking their own decisions on how to react to each particular case, that's not going to happen. And then you have that UN block at the Security Council. So I think what Gaza is doing is showing how far a country can go, like Israel, in terms of violating with impunity international law and just basic standards of human morality. But at the same time, I think it shows the weaknesses that we have in the international system. So I think one of the reasons Israel can do this, of course, is because it has absolute American support in the Security Council, and the United States, it protects Israel. The problem with Sudan, the Congo, Lebanon, other countries that are also facing, if not Israeli, certainly all kinds of corporate and other international forms of genocide and attacks on their population, is that those countries don't have powerful patrons like Israel does that will give them the diplomatic coverage in the UN to avoid sanctions. So the countries that are sanctioned through the UN or the ICJ even, or the ICC, tend to be, smaller countries, from Yugoslavia to Liberia to, places that don't have much of an impact in the international community. And therefore, countries feel free to sanction justifiably, to sanction human rights violators in those countries. So I think the problem is, how do you hold powerful countries, including Israel, responsible under international law? And the way the whole system is set up, it's smaller countries, non-state actors that are considered terrorists, even though many of them are engaged in legitimate resistance against imperialism and occupation and apartheid and colonization. And at the same time, countries like Israel can get away with it. So I think that's a real question that we have to discuss much more, is the wider implications. Because as you say, the genocide is happening not only on Palestine, but there's genocides happening in other places that face this, and trying to stop them faces the same problems of international politics. International politics trumps international humanitarian law and UN resolutions. And that's one of the problems that I think we have to address.
Well, absolutely. On yesterday's show, I'd interviewed a Venezuelan ambassador to Malaysia, Thailand, and Brunei. And they had written, Venezuela, that is, a letter to the UN Security Council now 4 days ago, and still no response. And in the words of Albert Einstein, doing the same thing, expecting a different result, is a symptom of insanity. So we certainly have to change our thinking and find creative and resilient ways of supporting each other as humanity. Professor Jeff Halper, Director of the Israeli Committee Against Home Demolitions, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be speaking again very soon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's Professor Jeff Halper there joining us with some incisive analysis on the deregistration or non-registration of NGOs that are assisting Palestine from a humanitarian relief perspective. Join us in our next link. We'll be talking to Tariq Jenkins about the attack on heritage resources in the Western Cape.